We light our chalice flame today, as chalice flames are lit in our brother and sister congregations across the world. And we will hear words by Nancy Reed McKee. Our community knows no boundaries. We are not confined by the physical limits of walls, or, for that matter, of what often binds us, restricts us, holds us back. We are freer than we know when we release ourselves and each other from expectations of what is needed for true community. We are here together in space. I see you. I hear you. I love you. And I light this chalice, a beacon of this community, holding us all together, here, now. Welcome. Welcome to this place. We gather virtually, as best we can, as community together, taking an opportunity to step away from the busyness of life, taking an opportunity to find space, to reflect. Our time together allows each of us to reflect a little on our lives, right now. Time to reorder the no doubt chaotic jumble of stuff in our minds. A time to refresh, a time to rebuild. I welcome you all today. This space and this time is yours. I bid you welcome. Our first reading today is a poem. It's a poem by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Now, Shelley was a very radical poet. He wrote it with an anarchic spirit and an opposition to the elite, to establishment, to creedal religion. I find it wonderful at times that he is remembered and thought of so highly by the establishment and the elite. One wonders sometimes whether one really knows the true story of those we commemorate. But this poem, Ozymandias, is most likely known to most of you. It tells of the discovery of a lost legacy, of a one-time ruler known as Ozymandias. And the poem is a typical move by Shelley to discredit the ruling elite, to put their achievements and apparent successes into a more fitting perspective. This is Ozymandias. I met a traveller from an ancient land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell you that its sculptor well of those passions red, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Ozymandias, Percy Bysshe Shelley. Let us come together now in a time of stillness and of prayer. Spirit of life, fill our hearts and cleanse us. Remove the resentments that create walls between us. Remove the jealousies that make us small. Remove the fears and guilts that close us into ourselves. Cleanse us and empty us of these things, so that we may know the force and power and fullness of the love that reconciles us to ourselves, to one another, and to life. Give us, in these moments of quiet, the power of love that forgives us when we fail ourselves, that allows us to ask for forgiveness, that empowers us to forgive. With forgiveness, lift us into new ways of loving. Free us to care for ourselves, to care for our families, to care for our friends, to care for strangers. With love, help us to bring comfort to those in pain, to those we know suffering loss at this time of crisis, to those exhausted, to bring comfort to our friends, to bring comfort to strangers. And with that caring, open us to new ways of giving. Free us to give our time, to give our affection, to give our affirmation, to give ourselves. Grateful for the love that nourishes us, we celebrate its power to renew us, to change us, and to give us hope. If you wish to, I welcome you to join with me in the last prayer, following the words on your screen. Eternal Spirit, may we be led from death to life, from falsehood to truth. May we be led from despair to hope, from fear to trust. May we be led from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. Amen. I would like to read now a story from a book called The Good Book, a Secular Bible. And it's been put together by the philosopher A.C. Grayling, Professor Grayling. And it's a collection of stories, of parables, of fictitious events, without any supernatural engagement. But a story that can be used in place of Bible stories, in place of other things, so that you don't have a supernatural God helping you through things. It's a great book, actually, and I'm extremely grateful to Professor Grayling, who has given me permission to use this story in our video, in our service today. The king of the city of stones was out riding one day when he saw an old man planting a fig tree. The king stopped and asked him why he took such pains to plant a tree whose fruit in all probability he could not expect to eat because of his age. Said the old man, "King, if I do not live long enough to taste the figs from this tree, my sons and their children will certainly do so." The king asked, "How old are you?" To which the other replied, "Some weeks short of 91. The king said, "If you live long enough to enjoy the fruit from this tree, be sure to let me know." Some years passed, and the king had forgotten about the incident. And then one day, the page came to him and told him that there was an old man who wished to present a basket of figs. The words stirred the king's memory, and he asked for the old man to be brought before him. Sure enough, it was the ancient of the fig tree, who'd brought the choicest specimens of fruit from the tree's offering. The king accepted the gift with gracious words and made the old man sit beside him as he tasted the figs, ordering his servants to put a fine cloak on the man and to give him a gold coin for every fig in the basket. When the old man had gone, the king's son asked, "Father, why did you show such honour to that man?" And the king replied, "He's been honoured by nature twice over. In preserving him to great age and in providing him with abundance of fruits, shall I honour him less?" At home in his village, the old man told the story of the king's kindness and generosity. An envious neighbour decided to outdo him by filling a very large basket with figs and other fruits and taking them to the king. At the palace door, he explained that he'd heard of the king's bounty to the ancient, and he wished to have the same reward in proportion, for here was a basket even more numerously filled with fruits. When the king heard this, he ordered the grasping man to be pelted with his own fruits and driven from the palace grounds. Words from A.C. Grayling's The Good Book, from the Book of Parables, chapter 19. We come now to our hymn. And our hymn today, bearing in mind our travellers in a foreign land, in Ozymandias at the start, and the king who is travelling across the kingdom of stones, we too are all travellers on a journey. And so our hymn is from the Purple Book, for those that have one, number 186. It's Andrew Hill's We Are Travellers on a Journey, and the words will be on our screens.
Son
We are caught in the midst of a pandemic and an emerging civil rights movement. The two do not fit together particularly well. The former is something no one wants. The latter is something everybody needs. Yet in this bewildering blur of 2020, we're confronted with the need to balance the two in our minds and to try and find the sensible response. It's very easy to dismiss one pursuit of the other, yet we cannot do that. The coronavirus pandemic threatens us all in some way, but with particularly devastating effect on the elderly and other vulnerable people. On the other hand, continued failure to address matters of inequality in our society also threatens us all and presents a real challenge to all who seek to make this world a better place. So what are we to do? Well, stories in recent days, since last Sunday at least, and following those dreadful scenes in London yesterday afternoon, have turned to the focus on the toppling or protection or removal of statues, or other hopes to overturn a cult of personality around those with less glittering truths in the way they lived their lives. Yet interestingly, this push to look at this around the story of statues is actually driving away from the true story underneath it all, the story of inequality and a lack of love. We don't need statues to remember people. Russia does not need a statue of Stalin to remember its history. Germany does not need a statue of Hitler to remember its history. Iraq does not need a statue of Saddam Hussein to remember its history. The removal of those statues was a recognition that the legacy they left was not one on which you might wish to build your future country. Removal from pedestal to museum to tell a different story in the context it deserves. Now ultimately, of course, all this discussion around statues and particular individuals are irrelevant. The stories of these people will disappear into the sands of time. Shelley's wonderful poem, Ozymandias, that we heard at the start of this service, tells us all about that. The traveller comes across a giant, crumbled statue in the desert to a great and mighty leader, a king of kings, no less, Ozymandias. And those that came to the statue were told to look around at his greatness, to seek his mighty works. And there is nothing, just sand and desert as far as the eye can see. Nothing remained of the no doubt glorious city, or the palace, or the wonder of the world that Ozymandias had built. From dust it had come, and to dust it had returned. And Ozymandias was known for nothing. Indeed, he was quite clearly now unknown. And there are many who will disappear eventually, as Ozymandias did. In centuries to come, those supposed immortals that are being protected will be lost. At most, they will be fabled horrors. However, when we look back at history, and all those people who thought they would be known forever for their wonder, long gone now, it's humbling to know they meant so little. Yet there is another subset of historical figures that have lasted long, and they've brought a legacy of a very different kind. Confucius, the Buddha, Moses, Jesus of Nazareth, Muhammad, Guru Nanak, many more. And in more recent history, we can speak of others who have continued this legacy. Harriet Tubman, who helped escaped slaves survive. Oskar Schindler, who saved so many Jews from the terror. And the astonishing thing about this group of people is not their self-promotion. It's the self-effacing way in which they conducted their lives. For many of them, when praised, they swiftly gave way to a higher being or to a purpose of goodness in life. Their deeds were not for self-promotion. Their deeds were not for self-aggrandizement. They were to benefit others. It was a work to make their lives of others better, to improve the lives of the oppressed, the hungry, the dispossessed, often at huge personal risk. These are the true builders of great legacies. Yet many would, I'm sure, be astonished to learn just how strongly they are remembered. But there are many, many, many more who are not remembered. Yet they too gave their all for the benefit of humankind. They too gave selflessly to the greater glory of all people, to relieve suffering, to help others less fortunate than themselves, to leave a legacy of hope. You'll have met such people in your lives. They're part of the community in which we live. They can be you, they can be me. As Emerson said, and there's a saying I used in a service the other week, there is no limit to what can be accomplished if it doesn't matter who gets the credit. And as is so often the case with Emerson, he again hits the nail on the head. It's the absence of glory-seeking that can appear to focus the mind on doing good. The ability to step back and consider the true purpose of your activity, the real requirement we're looking to meet. Our second reading today, from A.C. Grayling's book, told the story of the old man and the fig tree. For me, the story works on a number of levels, and it's of course very similar to other religious myths and parables. And it's a great story. So what did we hear? We heard of a king noticing an old man planting a fig tree. A tree which, in all likelihood, the old man will never taste the fruit. He knows that, but he's not planting the tree for himself. This is a tree that will produce fruit. The harvest of this may be for younger generations. But so what? The legacy the old man might leave is generous and unselfish. However, life is kind to the old man. He does in fact live many years longer, and he sees the fig tree bear fruit. And how does he celebrate this? He immediately takes some of the fruit to the king to share. Not as a result of an obligation, not a royal demand or decree, but the simple sharing of a gift from nature. The king appears both touched by this unselfish generosity of the man and is delighted at the natural good fortune of his continued life. The king celebrates the life and the gifts of the man, and he rewards him with gold, a reward we must suspect was never actually sought by the old man, much as his extra long life was equally unexpected. Now, we're not given the name of the old man, yet this is someone who has left a legacy, fruits for the generation that follow him. As it happens, he does get some reward for this, but that was not his purpose in planting the tree. He sought no fame, he sought no gold for himself, he was simply pleased to give freely. Now, the second man in the story we heard of was not prepared to give freely without hope of reward. He plotted to make himself known for great things and demand immediate reward for his cunning. He was, instead, pelted with the fruits he had brought. Now, if perhaps we saw the king in this story as the image of love, the ultimate humanity, the point is the reward in life was a surprise to the old man. He was doing good for the sake of humanity as a whole, not himself. And perhaps there's a message here for those who are tempted to see themselves as the central point around which the world revolves. It doesn't. It revolves around all of us. In fact, it doesn't revolve around any of us, we're on it. And John Andrew Holmes, the American physician and writer from the early 20th century, said, "It's well to remember that the entire universe, with one trifling exception, is composed of others." For me, that's the point. The point I do well to be reminded of sometimes. It's working together for the good of the greater whole that really matters. The only significant element of humanity in this world is made in community, by people working for others, in groups, in pairs, alone, but working for and usually with others. I do not propose we build statues to remind everyone how great we are, or to persuade people how great we are when we're not really. I'm not so sure that many of us will leave a named legacy that will generate thoughts of perfection among generations in the long future to come. But the legacy I hope we might all try to contribute to is the legacy of this generation to the generations to come. To bring peace and love to the world, to unite people, to share, to bring equality, to give people, everybody, the best chance for the future of this earth and its inhabitants. To have helped build a world of love, no matter how small or no matter how anonymous that might be, is surely the greatest memorial we could ever hope to leave. Let us come together now in a time of stillness, of reflection, of silence. As we settle our bodies, perhaps closing our eyes and focusing on our breath. I shall read some words from the book Voices from the Margins, a collection of pieces of voices usually lost in the noise of the majority, the unheard, the overlooked, the others. This piece by Clyde, Grubbs and Marjorie Bowens-Wheatley is History's Road. As we settle our bodies, I shall read these words, and we shall come together in stillness and quiet. The stillness will be broken with music to continue our reflection. As we settle our bodies. The road of history is long, full of both hope and disappointment. In times past, there have been wars and rumours of wars, violence and exploitation, hunger and homelessness, and destruction of this earth, life's creation. We have become a global village, with a growing realisation of how fragile this earth is, and how interconnected we are to each other and to all creation. We cannot continue to live in the old way. We will make a change, seek a new way, a way toward peace with justice and a healthy planet. We have been given a vision of the good, and we yearn for a new way. But where are we to find the courage to begin this new work? We know that a different tomorrow is possible, but how can we build it? We think of the prophets, women and men who voiced unpopular opinions, who made personal sacrifices, and who sometimes lost their lives for the sake of justice. We think of Isaiah, who called out to let those who are held in captivity go free, to give solace to the poor and homeless. Let us be inspired by all who work to overcome misery, poverty, exploitation. We think of Harriet Tubman, who called out to people of goodwill to join her on an underground railroad, to lift a dehumanized people from the bondage of slavery to the promise of freedom, even when it meant challenging unjust laws. Let us be inspired by those who are outlaws for freedom. We think of Gandhi, whose belief in soul force, the witness to love's truth, helped to overthrow the oppression of an empire and gave witness to the way of non-violent action. Let us be inspired to become witnesses for peace. We think of Chief Seattle, who reminded us that we belong to the earth, not the earth to us. Let us be inspired by all those who work for the healing of creation. Who are the prophets who inspire you? They may be well known, or known only to you. May they join a great cloud of witness to a new way of life, the way of peace and justice, the way of justice lived according to the way of peace, the beloved community. So may it be. Some closing words. Spirit of life, we give thanks for your presence, for light and for love, for night and for change. Our worship is over, but our service continues. As we depart, may there be peace among us, now and forever.